So let's orient everyone around the wheel. This is the natal chart wheel. I use whole signs mostly. Sometimes I pull in a different house system. But what resonated today was whole signs. And so let's start. So these are the planet symbols, and they are positioned based on her time of birth. So they don't change in like a natal chart reading. There's other types of charts that you can pull up and it'll look completely different. These are the sign symbols: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And then I pulled in the transits for that date just to see what was going on. And there were some interesting observations with that date. And what else? These pie slices, there's no lines in the sky, but we need a system. And so these pie slices represent different areas of life, different fields of experience, places where we're developing. Even if there's no planets in a house, that doesn't mean like it's empty or just like nothing is happening there. You just interpret through the sign. The sign determines how you are to, it's not a have to, but I guess how you can experience more ease in this area of your life. And it can determine what kind of activities you can do to experience that ease. And then if we see a huge emphasis, right, in a chart, we know that there's a concentration of energy. So these areas of life where there's stelliums, which is 3 or more planets, multiple planets, there's an emphasis in that area of life. So the houses, I'll run through them quickly. So the first house, this is the rising, and this is what AC is. It's your ascendant sign. And you can think of the ascendant as your outlook on the world. It's your outlook in the world and what your automatic, like spontaneous way of behaving is going to be. And it's also where we get a good impression, or we get an impression of like your style, kind of who you are, like an outline of you, versus the sun sign, which is really where we get to see your vitality, your essence, what really lights you up. The second house rules. So let's make it a story where if you're dropped in a new planet, new planet, you're on Earth in this lifetime, and you're like in the first house, establishing your identity, seeing, this is your I am energy, seeing yourself as different from those you're in community with. The second house is, okay, I'm here, and what are the resources here that are going to help me feel secure and stable? And so it's tangible things like in our society, it's an earth, it's money. It's also art, things, resources that you can accumulate, you can trade, you can barter. They, over time, they accumulate in value. And how do you manage your resources? So it has a lot to do with like just feeling stable and supported in this lifetime. And there's also an undertone of worth with the second house, because if you feel like you're not supported, you're going to feel like, so part of that's going to feel like you're not good enough. Like it's me that's not able to generate my own security here. Third house is communication and perception. This is where you start to realize that like maybe the way that you perceive and experience this reality is different from others. So you're expressing your perception. You're taking information in, you're synthesizing it, you're expressing it, it's your unique opinion. And it's also the people that are in close proximity to you, like neighbors and siblings and those like early communities that make up your early world, that kind of inform your perception of the world, your early perception of the world. And it's your communication. Fourth house is family. So this is like the soul family, people you incarnated with. Well, the moon can also be soul family, but this is, the unit you incarnated into. And what do you, if you think about being a child, being in your home environment, there's just certain programs and ways of thinking and being and behaving that are automatic. Like they're almost like infused in you because this was your early environment. That early programming that we get from our families. It's the place where it represents home and privacy, and like inner emotional peace. Like this should be, I'll put it in should, the place where we can feel most at ease is that home inside of ourselves, maybe, and or the physical home that we live into, and the people that we consider to be home. And with this house, it also has implication over like, okay, you're a child, you've absorbed all these programs. Now you're maturing into your adulthood and you get to decide what serves you, what needs to stay as a part of maybe your, I don't want to call it a philosophy because that's more ninth house, but what stays and what goes in terms of your home life and a legacy you want to leave behind. The fifth house, this is where we start to play. We start to think about our self-expression. It's very creative. We're free-spirited here, love affairs. This is a house of pleasure. The sixth house is like, okay, I've been fooling around and now I need to focus on my responsibilities, my duties, my capacity. This is a big house of health. Think about your life plate, everything that you put on your life plate, like you have full control in the sixth house, the things that are happening in your day-to-day, you have the ability to take on or take off, to say this area, this needs more of my attention, but this needs less of my attention. And often how well we like rule our life plate can determine how well we feel in our bodies. The seventh house, this is our one-to-one relationships. So it's our partnerships. Yes, that can be marriages, that can be romantic partners, so that's business partners, but it's also friends that you feel accountable to. If you change behavior, you explain because you feel there's a sense of partnership and unity, like accountability there. Where if you just fall off the map and decided and changed your behavior, it would be problematic. What else in this house? This is where, so it's ruling one-to-one relationship, but that also means like we are learning how to cooperate in relationships. Whereas the first house is all about self and selfhood, self-protection, self-assertion, selfhood. Can be selfishness, our Aries energy. The seventh house, which is typically, which is ruled by Libra, but this person has Sagittarius here. That is our we consciousness. How well do we relate with one another, even when it seems challenging to relate with one another? Can we still find like the win-win-win? Maybe it's easier. I don't know if easy is the right word, but we often lean toward thinking that relationship dynamics have to be win-lose. And sometimes that can happen in the seventh house, but our work here is to find the win-win, to find the compromise. Here we have this group of people that we're partners with. This is the house of intimacy. Who do we get even closer with? Like it rules sex, it rules. Think about what happens when we merge with people, the more vulnerable we are with people. What's likely to happen is that we're also triggered. So it tends to be the house where we respond to our vulnerabilities, like we react because we feel vulnerable. And what does that look like? So it can be a house of, it's Scorpio's house. So it's definitely a house of like psychoanalysis, like figuring out why are you responding to a situation this way? So it can feel like the house of trauma. And how do we resolve that? And like the sign gives us direction into how to do that. The ninth house, we can think of it like, okay, I've been triggered, I have trauma, I need to resolve it. In some ways, we can think of the ninth house as a new perspective. It also relates to the third, a new perspective, a new outlook has been opened up to us, where we now have to go out and seek new information to help us integrate what was happening here, integrate, learn about, resolve what was happening here. So this rules the higher mind. This rules education that we choose, mentorships, apprenticeships, just other types of philosophies that we want to explore. We expand our outlook on the world. We travel. This is Sagittarius's house. So we travel, and travel is broader than like getting on a plane. There are many ways that we can travel into other experiences and allow them to change us. Because we're exposed to something new. So this is where we go beyond what third house taught us, exposed us to what the world was. This is why we really get to see that the world is much larger and bigger than us. And the 10th house is where we think about, what's my contribution going to be in the world? My public contribution. So career, work. We often see the midheaven in the 10th house, which is like self-actualization. You're becoming the person you always thought you always, I don't say thought, always like internally knew was in you, knew who you were. And this is hopefully where you start to feel like you are getting closer to you out in the world. Like that inner you is coming out in the world, and it's really that authentic you. There's an undertone of caring about our reputation here. So another undertone of self-worth here. If we can't, or if we feel like we're not actualizing and we're having like challenges in our public work, our vocation, our career, like we're not expressing ourselves the way we internally know that we can, that can feel like a, I don't know, ding to our sense of self-worth. And then the 11th house, so we went from I am consciousness in the first house, we consciousness in the 7th house, to us consciousness in the 11th house. You're starting to think more globally. You're thinking more about the world, like larger community, the impact of your actions, what's the ripple effect of that on others, and also like what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations for making the world a better place? And then the 12th house, this is our spiritual center, where in some ways, I think we're trying to find completion with our time here. And it's where we're invited to be most introspective in a different way than in Scorpio, which is very psychoanalytical. This is being introspective so that we're tapping into the oneness that we all come from, spirit, God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. And this is where, if we feel hindered, it's the house of solitude, it's the house of, but solitude can feel like imprisonment, right? Where it can feel like we're trapped, maybe inside of a pattern. And one way to find the answer is helpful to know your own chart, but it's really helpful to have some type of introspective practice. Meditation in the broadest sense of the word, whatever helps you tap into your internal spaces, your internal voice and yourself.